4 months ago, Valve changed the drop system to try and limit case farmers. When that didn't work, they introduced the care package solution, and what we're seeing right now is very interesting because they're starting to do the exact same thing with currencies. A while ago, they tried to reduce the impact currencies would have by reverting people's locations back to where they were from, and this is coming from an actual case farmer. But now what they just did is eliminated some currencies that are absolutely crucial for some people just because of a couple exploiters. SkinSwap is today's sponsor, and they're also sponsoring you with a free bonus for signing up with the first link in the description. They're the premier place for CSGO and Rust skins with a massive trading site and a top-of-the-line marketplace, offering you the most competitive rates out there and a massive 40% bonus when you're using that link in the description. Combine that with their top-of-the-line selling feature with many payout options and their trading feature legitimately taking you just about a minute, and there's no reason not to sign up with that first link in the description. Now, when we go back to Stockholm, we saw a very interesting development. That's because people could buy capsules for 15 cents. Well, specific people, because that's because people in Turkey or people on the Turkish lira could go ahead and buy these at a significant discount because the Turkish lira was going down the drain at that time. That allowed people to absolutely flood the market by instantly buying them and reselling them a week later on the Steam market, and this created a major problem. We saw this problem resurface with Paris because the Argentinian peso this time decided to go down the drain, and that created a very significant problem, very similar to what we saw for Stockholm. The Turkish and the Argentine peso have now been set for removal in less than a month by Valve, and this is just really unfortunate for the people that actually use those currencies because of a couple specific exploiters and Valve's inability to just update these currencies in real time. This is now a significant problem. Now, the good news about this is if you're a Paris investor, this is actually probably more beneficial than it is harmful. That's because when we look at the next major, Copenhagen 2024, there's almost a 0% chance we're actually going to see any currency conversion issues there, and people thought it wasn't going to happen after Stockholm, but then we saw it resurface once again with Paris, and that absolutely increased the supply more than it needed to be, and that's why we're partially in the current situation we are now. It's not a major factor, but any minor factor we can get rid of is definitely going to be beneficial. Valve has also had some pretty interesting developments elsewhere. Skins are no longer a thing. Well, that's if you haven't made any market transactions or booted up the game, but it's very interesting how we saw every single skin in your inventory or every single item even turn to a vanilla Desert Eagle. Now, this is just such an interesting development because it shows Valve is definitely interested in skins in the inventories, but I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. Now, talking about that brand new branch, it's something that has just been confirmed to be a packet solution, which is still interesting, although it's not too impactful for investing otherwise as a whole. Now, when we talk about a profitable investment, one of the easiest ways to put yourself in that trajectory is looking at team stickers that don't have a ton of alternatives or are brand new and then instantly removed. Usually, if they have a decent amount of demand, these ones can be super profitable. Now, looking at Paris, there's not a ton of options here, but there is one I want to point out, and that's actually Heroic. Now, Heroic isn't brand new, but this is the first time they've came in with this brand new logo, and they're having some pretty significant team problems. That's because they're currently ongoing a little bit of an interesting situation where two of their players forced out Cadian, and what happened when those two players were back into the lineup, they went ahead and signed a deal with Astralis. Now, this is such an interesting development because now theoretically Heroic could be out 3 players, 3 out of their 5, which would really screw up their rankings and their points moving forward. Now, keep in mind they do have 10 months until their contract expires, but I can't imagine they're going to continue the current contract if they're on this bad of terms. Combine that with the fact that Heroic has actually not won a worthwhile game in almost 2.5 months, and this is an area I think you should keep your eye on. Not specifically because I think it's going to absolutely explode, but it's an opportunity, and if you can start thinking about it now and the opportunity presents itself, it could be a decent chance for you to look into. Now, we're starting to see an absolutely massive opportunity form. That's because we can look at the cases on the Steam market, and specifically these cheaper rare cases to start. We've mentioned these. A lot of these are up quite significantly in the past 30 days, potentially 50%. Even some of the older cases, like we're talking Spectrums, Gammas, they're also up a decent amount, or they're relatively similar to the price they were sitting 30 days ago. Now, this is very interesting because when we look at Buff, we see a completely different story. In fact, a lot of these are down significantly, or at least down a little bit. Now, this is super interesting because we also have this resource right here. This is provided to me by my case farmer, and we can see right here in April, this was the moment we actually saw the peak of prices. That's because the chart we're looking at right here is the amount of deficit we're seeing for total cases overall, meaning if there's a lot of cases on box and there's not too many dropped, it's going to be really similar to what we're seeing in this specific example. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. We're seeing a very similar number of a deficit to what we saw in April when we saw the peak of prices. Now, this is very important because this is starting to translate a little bit more on Steam. We can see prices starting to reach an all-time high, and this is not too out of the ordinary, especially considering the player numbers right now aren't too high, so there's not too many cases, and even less plus rare cases, which make up 1% of the drop pool, but we're not seeing this on buff, and this creates a major opportunity on buff if you're looking to buy in, because a lot of these cases have not moved at all. In fact, we're starting to see the gap between Steam money and buff money grow significantly. This is very interesting because even though the RMB is down, it's only down about 2-3%, but that's another 2-3% that they've added onto this gap. The big point I want to get at here is if you're looking to buy, it's going to be worthwhile for you right now to go through the stress of trying to get buff balance potentially if you're trying to buy a very significant amount of cases. However, what's even more interesting than that is if we want to talk about Paris capsules. Now, if we talk about Paris capsules on Steam, we talked about how some of them are almost at a 40-50% increase already, especially for the autographs. They're starting to pop off a little bit, but it's very interesting when we take that over to buff. Now, if you don't remember, buff prices were sitting at about 19 to 22 cents throughout the sale, and currently they're sitting at about 19 or 20 cents. This is the exact same price they were selling for during the sale. Potentially, you might have even bought them for more expensive than this when they were only 25 cents on Steam, and that's very interesting because it gives us a little bit of a perspective of how many of these capsules total are out there. But the most important thing when it comes to a major capsule succeeding is the sustained demand. Are we seeing a lot of people unboxing these capsules after they've been removed from the shop? And that's exactly what we're not seeing here, at least on buff. That's a very interesting thing because we can head over to CSROI, see that the ROI on these have dropped significantly down to a more reasonable amount, and it seems like the people on buff that are using buff to buy, they're not really interested at this price, which is such an interesting predicament. Now, when it comes to updates for CS2, it's been quite light, especially for the past couple of weeks. The last major update we got, in my opinion, was on October 12th, where we got this long string right here. But the truth is, there's something behind that, and that's because the Dota 2 International is going on right now. Now, the Dota 2 International is usually about a $30 to $40 million event. In 2021, it was $40 million, and the person in 5th to 6th place took home $1.4 million. Compare that to today, where now the first place finisher is less than that, and I think Valve is starting to realize that they have to focus a little bit more on CS2 and less on Dota, and once this is finished up on Sunday, we're probably going to start seeing a lot more updates, in my personal opinion. Now, what does all this mean for you personally? Well, first off, I think you're probably going to be in a better position moving forward for major capsule investing, just because we're not going to see people reselling currency conversion issues. With that being said, I still think it's a great time to invest in some of those rare cases, especially if you're trying to do so on buff. At the current moment, the margin is so wide that it doesn't really make sense to do it any other way other than buying money to go ahead and buy cases on buff. It just doesn't make sense. And honestly speaking, the same goes for Paris. Paris has not moved so far in price on buff, which may seem like a problem, but it also is a very strong opportunity if you're trying to get into the Paris game. A lot of people regretted their decisions to not buy into Paris, or at least that's what I've seen in the comments, and I think this could be a great opportunity if you're still wanting to do that, to get it at a very similar price to everyone else. I'm also excited to see where the next couple of weeks takes us for updates, but that's all I got. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day.